Okay.
Okay. Well, what was I? Uh,
All right. You were telling a story about that your friend and roommate gets drunk from time to time, a binge drinker. Okay.
yeah. And this one day, he was it was kind of getting obnoxious, and because I was trying to sleep, and I was really trying to, I had to work, and I realized at that moment, like that little child that we were talking about, not too angry, but just opinionated in the way of judging. Like I don't like, even though I'm not getting attacked. He wasn't around me. It wasn't that loud. But then I realized that I just sat there and I said, okay, wait, you know, we're both brothers in one thing: old age, sickness, and death. And we only want one thing, and that's happiness. And that's the only thing that makes us one. And if I can't see that, then I won't be able to let that go. And then when I saw it and I chanted the metta and I really try, like I really just accepted. I didn't try, I just accepted the fact that he too is a human being, or like me or whatever, like in the sense of that way. And then it
Yeah.
just came about where I was like, that opened up a whole door for to love a lot of more people as well, like my family and everything, because I realized it's not about being right. It's not about being right. It's just about everybody wants that. Everybody wants a satisfaction. Everybody, and if they have it, give it to them. Show it them in their life that they have it in some way. And I was even able to talk to my stepmom, and I never talked to her ever, like, because she only talks Spanish, and I talk Spanish too, but I was always kind of shy, and I didn't know how to really. And then I joked around with her, and I made her laugh, and it was it was it was just weird. I apologized to my parents for certain things. Like it was kind of like it was like a. I even think about crying sometimes because it's kind of like,
Yeah. Uh huh. Let us call it an epiphany.
yeah, yeah.
All right. This is basically something, though it is formally spoken of in uh, the suttas, especially one that I'm thinking of, uh, is the reason why that it's the seven factors of awakening or the sambojana that has to precede real metta.
Okay.
Okay, and basically what that means is that recognizing by direct observation that we are all in this together, that everybody is hurting,
Yeah.
everybody is hurting, and that everybody is hurting because of the, um, let us say, that they're hurting themselves, and they were taught how to do that when they were children. And so that's the big deal. But when we recognize, hey man, there's a really bigger deal, and that really bigger deal is old age, sickness, and death. Those things we're not going to escape.
Yeah.
Okay. That in fact, um, most we can escape two of them. But the only way we can do that is an early death. So that's the most unlucky. If you're really, really lucky, you're going to get really old. If you get really, really lucky, you're going to get sick, but you're not going to die from it. All
Yeah.
right? So death is actually the end of it, and that's the ultimate suffering. And the reason that it's the ultimate suffering is because it goes against the deeply, most deeply buried of all, of right into the DNA, is our self-preservation instinct. Because without that, the species wouldn't have survived. It's that self preservation instinct, and I think that that's probably stronger in humans than it is in other species because we've been close to extinction. and that we go through a lot of warfare, and there has been a lot of danger. And so we have been conditioned uh, to manage that danger well, in the sense of being able to get out of the way of dangerous things. But we have failed in the sense that we see danger now in places that where it really doesn't even exist. And so
Yeah.
we go around paranoid, and we go around in a state of fear. And one of the things is that we're afraid of mostly is other people.
Yeah, we're afraid to be seen in a certain way. Like
Hmm.
we're afraid, oh, like we want closure, but close the door then. Like just close the door. Like that's the whole thing. There is no going back. And that's the hardest thing to understand for all of us. There is no going back. I'm sorry that first girlfriend you had will not love you ever again the same way. And that's the truth. And that's just how it is, you know?
Lucky just stole a piece of chicken. And I saw her go out and down, and she's out in the yard now, sniffing and licking. Never
Yeah,
mind. Sorry about that. That was something that happened in this moment. And
that's beautiful. But it was quite funny because I remember like the first time that I really felt like I needed to be free from suffering is when I lost my first love, my first girlfriend. Because in my life at the time, she was the like in my mind, she was the only good quality in my life, right? Like, oh, that's it. That's all I
oh,
ever
that's
had.
what you thought.
That's what I thought. And then at the time when she left and everything disappeared and all that, I was just left with this total obliterating hatred for life. Like just this total like oh wow, like I'll never if that left, then there's nothing. Like in that sense, because that's
Hmm.
all we put our hinge on. We put our
When you
whole
put
life.
all your eggs in one basket, and when the basket is gone, you've lost everything, so you think.
Yeah, so I think exactly. And it was just like took me a while to like finally realize that oh, it's okay. That there's actually it was never a problem to begin with. But I was making it a problem because I didn't
True.
know any better.
Hmm. Yes. That's what I was meaning then about uh, having how I harmed myself by refusing to give anybody credit for anything. And I use the word compliment for that. But basically, it is um, like you were mentioning, that pouting child who sees fault in everything because he's not looking at himself.
Yeah.
To recognize that, and when I figured out that really the reason that I wasn't willing to compliment or to even be truthful with other people or congratulatory was because I felt that I was losing something by doing so. That why should I compliment him when I've already, have a pouting lip about him anyway?
Yeah. It was funny because I even told my friend, like, I finally realized that all my parents wanted was a thank you. It's like, and that really changed that. Like it really did. Like I was like, oh my God, I was kind of an asshole as well. you
Mm-hmm.
know, mostly actually, you know, in my case.
Well, that's actually the case. Is that when we really do recognize dukkha, we understand that, oh, my reactions to dukkha that I'm creating for myself is to try to share it with others. And it's when we're sharing our dukkha mindlessly in one way or mindlessly in another, we're still being an asshole
Yeah.
because we're trying to give someone our shit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Adding
We're trying to
facts.
take a dump on someone, literally.
Yeah, yeah.
There is actually, this novel had a profound effect upon me. And the name of the novel is Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky,
Oh, wow.
Russian novelist.
Yeah.
Long, long book.
He's a great
And
author.
well, in recent times, I have looked in uh, Cliff Notes or Wikipedia kind of stuff and found that the profound impact that that novel had on me is not even mentioned in the Cliff Notes. But basically, it's like this that very, very quick version of the story. A girl works for old lady up in the top floor of the apartment building. Girl has a boyfriend. Boyfriend loves girlfriend, but he sees that old lady up there and he sees how wealthy she is. And so he kills her with an axe and steals her stuff. The police come in, take an investigation, and kind of figure out that it's he that did it. In their closing in on him, he confesses to his girlfriend. By
Okay.
confessing to her, see, he should have gone to the police and confessed to them.
Hmm.
That would have been the right thing to do. The wrong thing to do was by trying to share his guilt, dumping the fear of getting caught for his bad behavior. He dumps that on his girlfriend.
Yeah.
Guess what? The whole rest of the book is about how bad her life gets because she knows.
Wow. Yeah, because of her guilt and keeping it a secret for him.
It didn't take long, but the guilt and the remorse of all of that was was really devastating to her. Okay, so that actually fits correctly and right in with that the Buddha recommends that when the young monk has done something wrong, that he should confess it to the appropriate and to the right people.
Yeah.
Okay, and in that regard, it would be to either your teacher or to a senior monk who knows how to handle that kind of burden. But that is, in fact, correctly, that's the job of the priest in the confessional. But most of the it's just a droning on and it doesn't mean anything, and that the end of it is some sort of penance that they have to pay. But there is not the issue of go and sin no more.
Yeah.
That's not at the end of the confessional, and that's exactly the way that the Pāṭimokkha in the Sangha is set up. And that is that every time that they have a Pāṭimokkha, some places they do it twice a month, but mostly it's once a month on the full moon. That's when the monks shave their heads and take a bath, and those are the symbolic parts for also shaving your mind and taking and giving it a bath too. And part of that is like taking that dump, and the way that you do that is by confessing all that's happened this month and things that you've done that you didn't approve of yourself. You're going to tell it to the teacher. And they do that the day of the Pāṭimokkha, and then as they're going into the Pāṭimokkha, then it does it much more formally, but now it's also formally as a ritual to where there's an actual little phrase that's about two paragraphs long, where every monk confesses and asks to be absolved of that, so that when the monks then go into the Pāṭimokkha for the recitation and the reading of the Pāṭimokkha, there is no objection or anything like that, because at that time then, and the Buddha said this, in fact, this is part of the tradition, the Buddha looks around at the Pāṭimokkha and says, O monks, I see a congregation here that is free from wrongdoing. They have been absolved and finished. Is that not the case? And every monk then will intentionally then look around and agree, I do not see anyone here that is being held responsible for wrongdoing.
Wow.
Wow, that's heavy duty, because what that means is that at the end of the Pāṭimokkha, everyone is back on friendly terms. We're
Yeah.
back friends again. We're not holding grudges or anything against each other.
It's like the practice of forgiveness.
It's actually a practice of forgiveness as well as absolution from confession.
Yeah.
And all of it is done together, and that's why the Pāṭimokkha is so important. Especially the larger the group of monks, the more important that is. So,
Yeah.
in fact, there's different Pāṭimokkha depending upon how many people there are. It gets really complicated.
Yeah. Uh,
Uh,
the the Pāṭimokkha, there's a lot of like that's like a story that the monks use, like all of the compilation of like the Vinaya and all that, right?
mhm.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, the Pāṭimokkha ceremony, the full one, is actually the recitation of then the list of rules of 227 rules.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, not all the rules are followed because some of those are like I've heard you joke about the wool one. I love that one. The wool, don't carry wool for 2 miles or something
Right,
like.
exactly. There's another one which is even more bizarre.
Really? Oh man.
Yeah,
What?
and that is that monks are forbidden to bathe more often than twice a month.
Oh wow. I mean, I think as a kid, I would have loved that.
Well, the reason for it is because at that particular point in time there was a drought,
Okay.
and so generally all of the monks will agree that at least that rule should have been abandoned.
Yeah, too much stink. Yeah, like after 2 months, I think I would really make someone throw up.
Yeah, except for one thing, and that is that if all of the monks are very careful with water, they will all bathe then at the Pāṭimokkha with very scarce water. 2 weeks later, they all stinky at the same place at the same time. So you got, you can't say you stink.
Yeah, yeah, everybody stinks here.
Because everybody stinks.
That's awesome.
But in any case, that's the important point that you've come to. And this is the easy way to say it, we're all in the same boat together. We really are Mahayana. This is not possibly Hinayana.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I know
That
what you mean
we
by that.
really are in the same boat. And that same boat is old age, sickness, and death, and all of the social ills that come with trying to avoid that ignorantly.
Yeah, and
That's what
that's a
all of society is. Society is nothing but the sum total of mistakes about how to avoid old age, sickness, and death.
yeah, it really is, and it's funny because there's this. I read a verse in the suttas, and I can't remember exactly where it was, but it said that when I think it was how when do the Four Noble Truths come into the world, or when is it Dhamma taught, or it was like when Paticca Samuppada is taught, why, like what conditions in the world do there have to be, and what are the conditions for a world not to have that teaching? And the Buddha was like, well, there's only three things: birth, old age, or he was saying like that basically, that there has to
Now,
be that.
birth leads to old age, sickness, and death. If you take birth, then you
Yeah.
will get old age, sickness, and death.
But funny enough, that's and in that way we in the human world we encounter the Dhamma because of that, which is kind of the craziest part, is because we're born in a world where there's birth, old age, sickness, and death, we have the opportunity to find
Mhm.
freedom from it, which is so
Exactly.
crazy. It's almost like
Because dogs have dog dukkha.
yeah, yeah,
Dogs have dog dukkha, but they picked a lot of, let us say, wise behavior up from humans. And because of that, they don't suffer so much. But believe me, you look at a wild dog, especially one in India, and you see a dog that's in really poor shape.
Oh yeah, I went to Puerto Rico a lot, and dogs are everywhere, so I know how they are. Dogs are everywhere, running. It's just like Thailand, almost, just running around. There's sick dogs, dogs that are dead, dogs
Hmm.
that are blind.
But so in that regard, um, one of the stories, in fact, is about the young monk who sees that the abbot is so well treated by, let us say, the higher class lay people who come to the Wat. He gets the best food, he has this, that, and the other thing,
Yeah,
and the young monk is jealous. And so eventually it comes out that he's jealous of the senior monk. And the senior monk says, "Okay, I tell you what, I'll swap places with you because right now you do not understand the dukkha of being the abbot.
yeah, yeah,
All you see is the rewards of it. You don't have to hear all the complaints of all of these people."
yeah. Like just like when you were a kid, I want to be 18. I want to be 18 already. No, you don't.
No, no, thank you. It looks like it's got benefits, but in fact, it's got responsibilities that other people require from you. That's exactly what Donald Trump's problem is he doesn't recognize that he got to deal with human beings.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
thinks that he's king. In fact, he thinks that Kim Jong Un is a very powerful person in North Korea. I guarantee you, he is the most insecure person in North Korea.
yeah,
How many people in North Korea have had to kill their uncle and several people he's killed that are close to him?
yeah, yeah. It's crazy over there.
Right. And the same thing with Putin. You think that Putin is good to go all the time? No, he's out killing people left, right, and center because he knows that if he don't kill them, they'll come after him, and he's got a lot of enemies.
Yeah, that's one thing about having that. It's like it's so weird. Like that's what I always say. I was like, if I never, as even as a kid, I was like, if you want that type of power, like all of that responsibility, there's something wrong with you. Like I just don't see why anyone would.
And yet, everybody in our country has that disease in the sense of raising little boys. You can be president. I would rather raise a child be wise enough to not want to be president.
Yeah, yeah, like that. I just don't understand why you would want to be. I mean, no
Why do
one
you
even
want to be a politician?
Yeah, and even as a like growing up, they used to say that all the time in school, you can be the president of the United States. Now they never say that anymore. Like,
I wonder why.
yeah, like no one wants to be. We just realized it. Who would
Because they
want to?
realize, right, that when you go into that swamp, you will get surrounded by alligators.
Yeah, yeah, it was.
Another way of looking at it is that anybody who wants power and takes power and usurps power and gets power, guess what? There's only one way to take power or to get power, and that is to steal it, to rob someone, to take power, right? Everybody has to give the king a little bit of power, and they resent that. And so when you take power, you are actually stealing from other people, and they will want to take revenge.
Yeah, and it's
But
crazy
but
because
but if you give power to someone through a compliment, then they like that because you're giving them a gift.
yeah, it was there was this sutta, and there's a good example of that. And I can't remember like every verse because it's so long. But the Buddha, I realized he has a way of like leading you. Like every time you think you got it, he's like, nope, that's not it. And then it's like, and then he goes on again and again and again, and then he's like, that's not it either. And then he goes for another one, and he was saying that for a monk when he gets ordained, he might have fame and renown and blah blah blah, and he's in a sublime state, da, 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 but still because of this he just, and it's always because he disparages others, because he thinks he's better than everyone else, because he still holds
Mhm.
on to the view that he's working for gain and honor and whatever, and and then it went all the way down, all the way, and the only one that was right was quite secluded from sensuality.
Mhm.
Like everything else was wrong,
I
and it's
think I
crazy.
remember that one. Yes, I think I've seen that sutta.
It's crazy because you realize even he'll get you like, oh yeah, yeah, and then you read and read and you're like, oh my god, I accepted that. You know, like you're like, wait, that's not right, and then like, and he just destroys, like he's just like, gotcha. Like he was so genius at that, it seems like in every sutta he's like, and or the one where he talks about the greater pleasures of practice and the refinement of pleasure, and then you think it's like, oh my god, he just keeps going and going, and like this man is insane. He's just like, he gives you so much, he kind of like, uh, he's like the zen master putting you up for a ride.
Right. Think about it like this then. You know what a slinky is.
Uh-huh, yeah, yeah, uh-huh.
Okay. So we have the idea of a spiral, and this is how the Buddha teaches. Goes around in circles, but he narrows in, focuses down like that. So he spirals in.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is like that. And then it's right at you, like, whoa. And then you feel it. You're like, oh my God,
Uh-huh.
that's right.
So he just doesn't go around in circles like the slinky, but the circles are getting smaller and smaller until he gets right down to it.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's funny because once I went back to listen to Bhante Vimalaransi, and I think you know who that
Uh-huh.
is. And wow, I was like, oh my God, like everything flew by my head years ago when I was listening to him. I just didn't get it. I didn't understand what he was saying. I thought he was like kind of a heretic because he didn't believe in reincarnation and all that stuff. And now it's like, oh my God, this guy is basically talking about the same thing like that we've been talking about. And I was like, and it kind of surprised me too. I finally kind of realized, like, oh my God, even in Buddhist cultures, there's still a lot of like, just a lot of people that will bash you if you say this stuff, like, because I've seen it on Discord as well, and I saw all, like, it was almost the weirdest thing. I kind of like was kind of like shocked to see that he was mentioning stories about how people really don't like what he's talking about in Sri Lanka and like in those Buddhist countries, and how they really reject a lot of this stuff. And it was just, and so it's just not the West. Like I used to think it was just the West. The West is the worst place in the universe. you know?
They're more open to it in Thailand than they are in Burma and Sri Lanka. They're hardcore against it in Sri Lanka. But this is something that I found out about Thailand that's taken some research because so much of it happened so many years ago. But Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was only part of a movement, but that nobility and the noble teaching of the Buddha has been in Thailand and alive and well, but just not open and not public because what you're saying there would be the general response to it. That in fact the noble Dhamma has had to go in hiding because of it's dangerous to let it out.
Yeah.
And it's dangerous for two reasons. So we'll talk about those reasons in just a minute. But the important thing to finish that point is that when Bhikkhu Buddhadasa started teaching, they actually, that same group in Sri Lanka, brought him up on a Sangha Dissessa charge of, which is actually quite a severe charge of trying to um, let
Schism.
us say, break up the Sangha. That's what the word Sangha Dissessa means, is to decease the Sangha.
Yeah. That's like
And
a
so and so they brought him up on those charges in Bangkok, but there were people in the Sangha, the Sangha Dissessa, by the way, generally has something to do with 20 monks. 20 monks for ordination, 20 monks for the ordination of a temple, uh, 20 monks for a good Pāṭimokkha, all kinds of things like that. The more the merrier. But in any case, on that board were some very, very high, powerful monks in Bangkok, because that was a really, really big deal. And that some of them were nobles. And so what happened in that time was is that there was a challenge put out of Pali scholars to really pick out what was the teaching of the Buddha in respect to rebirth. And what they found was that the Dhamma, more or less, the suttas and all, supported Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, and it was only later literature that would strongly support. But that even the suttas that we have translated into English, when they're translated by one who I will lovingly call for a moment a rebirther,
Yeah, I know. I know you're
when
talking.
the translations are done by the rebirthers, they will put rebirth into it in their imagination when in fact the Pali doesn't have it at all.
Yeah.
The word deva, for instance, does not mean a magical being. A deva is just a very high powered person like a king or an aristocrat or something like that. Same thing with Brahman. Brahman does not mean a god, it means the very best.
Yeah, like Devi, like they would call like a Ma a Devi. Like in India, like a guru who's a woman, they would call her a Devi.
Hmm. Right. And in Asia, the word deva is, let us say, a magical word for a real thing.
Yeah.
The translations into English is the magical term is not translated into a real thing, which it is translated into a magical thing. So
Yeah.
that we, in English, for instance, the way to say it is that in English we say we, in Asia, better start there. In Asia, they will use magical words for real things. In English, we only allow magical words to be used for magical things, so that we cannot then take that magical word and translate it into something real. We've got to take that magical word and translate it into something that's really nothing but magic.
Yeah, yeah, because we can't see it like any other way.
Hmm.
Well, I think,
So
yeah.
let's get back then to the point that after they did all of this research, they came to find out that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was correct, but they already knew that he was correct. And this is what started a big revolution in Thailand. Was is that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was the one teacher who was no longer willing to straddle the fence or to speak out of both sides of his mouth. You see, even the Buddha did that. We can also be polite and call it pacing and leading. But
Yeah, yeah,
basically, it's like this: if people believe in magic and ask magical questions, they will get a magical answer that hopefully will lead them into wisdom.
yeah, yeah,
Bhikkhu
yeah.
Buddhadasa says, no, no way, nothing doing. When they come to me with a magical question, they're going to get a real answer, period. They are not going to get a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
One of the examples that I have of this is that my friend David, a monk at the time when he still had to get his visa, he didn't have his religious things going yet. And so he went to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia to get another visa. And while he was there, he decided to visit the big Thai temple that was in Kuala Lumpur. And he was quite surprised to find that the temple abbot was not a Thai, but a Sri Lankan, because there's really a lot of Sri Lankans in Malaysia as well as Tamils. So he goes up to the abbot, and the abbot is talking to an old Chinese lady, and they're speaking in English because otherwise she would be speaking, and her native language would be Chinese, and his would be Sinhalese. So they're speaking in English, and and the issue is her husband has just died. And so this monk is giving her all of this stuff about the right kind of pujas and things like this, and how he's going to go off and that, there, and the other thing. And David was thinking to himself, I'm in front of the wrong dude here.
Yeah, yeah.
But when that conversation was finished, and the Sri Lankan monk was very happy to see David, a Westerner, dressed in orange robes. And when David said that he was from Watsuwan Mok, immediately that monk changed.
Wow. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. That the monks actually, so that was the way that it's always been, is because, like Vila Maramsi, he's taking Bhikkhu Buddhadasa's position of telling them the truth even when they don't want to hear it.
Yeah. It's funny because when I was writing, I had this feeling that I was being too honest when I was writing about the Four Noble Truths. Like, I was like, but then I realized, it's like, wait, I can't hold back, because if I hold back, then I'm lying. Like, I was like, because I was
All
like, am I going
right.
to scare people away?
Exactly. Well, there is an idea of pacing and leading. And that's the way the Buddha's method. That's that whole spiraling in and spiraling in. A clear example of him doing that is in Sutta number 60, to where at the beginning it looks like that he's using Pascal's wager for people to go say, okay, well, maybe you should believe in reincarnation. But by the end of that sutta, he's turned everything upside down. And
Yeah.
he's talking about it from the perspective of the noble. That if you know what noble is and you know how to live, why don't you go ahead and do that? Why do you just happen to want to believe because of the possibility of reincarnation when you could actually live according to a noble existence? And so he spirals in on it that way. That's the way of handling it. And this is where Bhikkhu Buddhadasa said, we've done that for 2,500 years now with only partial success. We've certainly been able to keep a root core Sangha going, but it doesn't grow very much. And so by letting the cat out of the bag, guess what? Bhikkhu Buddhadasa had tremendous support already there in Thailand of the nobles who were already there,
Yeah.
including members of the royal family.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. They knew about that as well.
They knew about it. It was well known, and that the source would go back to,
Wow.
well, Bhikkhu Buddhadasa references his teacher, and his teacher's name was Bhikkhu Buddha Gosajarn. And Buddha Gosajarn was the Samdet Sangharaj. He was the head monk, or let us say kind of like a prime minister of the monks in Thailand at the time. And the way that he got that was because his teacher was also the Samdet Sangharaj, who was also a prince who had to disrobe so that he could become king. And that happened in 1916, 17, something like that. So
It's
this
like
is all
a
well
story.
known history of these nobles.
Yeah, it's like a Bible story or something. Like,
Uh huh.
like all these kings, and there's this like kind of inner knowledge, and but it
Well, you
got out.
would expect, yeah, you would expect then that people who have, let us say, the very best education, will in fact sometimes get the very best education. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny because Vimala Ranzi, this is just a kind of joke, and that it's not serious, but it's funny because he was talking about the Visuddhimagga and the history of it. There was two people who were very the key elements to it. Buddhaghosa and Buddhadasa. Isn't that kind of, that's funny. I just found it so funny, like the irony that the two people who messed everything up and have the same name as the two people who kind of fixed everything, which is kind of hilarious. And they knew each other. The Buddhaghosa, the Visuddhimagga, and Buddhadasa, who translated a lot of the commentaries in Pali as well. They knew each other actually, which is kind of hilarious.
That part of the story I don't know. But getting back to that issue is that I got to say it this way, and that is the religion of Buddhism and Islam and Christianity, we should give them credit and congratulate them for being capable of building a society. Nobles can't do that.
Yeah, I don't like
Nobles are in the great minority, and not only that, but the teaching of the actual noble Dhamma has to be done with someone who is wise enough to get it. Okay? It's like you only push a young bird out of the nest when you know he's ready to fly. If you push that bird out of the nest before he's ready to fly, he will fall.
Yeah, yeah,
Now, that means that if you're trying to take an individual out of reincarnation view, which would be ordinary right view, and teach him the noble Dhamma, it's more than likely he's going to fall into wrong view.
yeah. This is what
Okay, how is that done? Is that if you say reincarnation doesn't exist, you're not going to be reborn that way, then he'll say, "Oh, well, that means I can get away with anything,"
yeah,
and he'll go around doing more harm because he has not yet dealt with his greed. So we actually have to start dealing with the greed and other things like that, and see what's going on before we finally give up on the delusion of me being a permanent self. So back to the whole idea that it's got leaked out that Buddhism teaches no self is actually a very dangerous teaching.
yeah, because it doesn't. Not only, and the Buddha even stayed quiet on that. He didn't
Yes,
say anything. Yeah.
exactly. Until the student is ready, we cannot teach that
Oh,
because otherwise it will destroy society, which is exactly what Bhikkhu Bodhi said about Bhikkhu Buddhadasa.
yeah,
That
yeah.
is quoted in the Wikipedia about Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. Why the guy who wrote the wiki? I think I'd like to take that out.
This
But
is
another one would be, okay, Bhikkhu Bodhi, you opened the door by you putting it out public that you think that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa is destroying Buddhism by, let us say, destroying the delusion of rebirth, and you're attacking Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. Wait till you hear what I have to say in my own personal attack about you.
yeah,
But I haven't really gotten it out yet.
yeah, and it's kind of like I like because it's funny because sometimes like even with talking to my friend, that I introduced you to, like it's really easy more for him because he doesn't believe like a lot of Westerners don't believe in reincarnation already. They don't believe in, but they believe in a self, which is hilarious. But it's
Right.
easier. It's a little easier
Well,
because
we've
they don't have magic.
exactly we've talked about that before. That there's in fact there are four different systems of belief. One is eternalism or semi-eternalism, which means the permanent self. That when I die, I'm going to go to heaven, or if I go to hell, I'll be there for a long, long time. So that long, long time then idea is either eternalism or semi-eternalism. If it eventually comes to an end, then it's semi-eternalism, but it's still eternal and eternal, on and on and on and on. With the idea that a self has two qualities. One, that it is strong, strong enough to survive death. And number two, it's identifiable.
Yeah,
Identifiable in the sense that the comma machine knows who to pin what stuff on. That God knows you as you, so he'll know whether because you did this, that, and the other thing in life that he'll assign you to heaven or hell or the back gates or something. Okay, so that those two qualities. Number one, permanent and strong, and number two, that self has to be identifiable. Modern physics proves both of those ideas wrong.
Yeah.
Logically, physically, it's a bad idea. But it is a delicious idea in the sense that, oh, that means that I will survive death. I, me, my. It's a very selfish point of view. But what they fail to understand is, and this is the funny part, this is hilarious. How can the soul be strong enough to survive death? And that's me, the soul. I am the soul. And yet I've still got fear,
Yeah.
especially fear of death. So that fear and that fear of death cannot be the soul, because the soul is secure and it knows it's secure and it's going to last forever and it's got nothing to be afraid of. And
Yeah.
yet the whole reason to believe in a soul is because we're afraid.
Mm.
So now you can see that that idea of a soul comes out of delusional thinking.
Yeah, dualistic thinking, because it's the Greeks, even the Christians, the Jews believe they called the soul. It was just, really meant the flesh, the body. Actually, the word for soul in the Jewish.
Is right. The word actually has been evolving. The funny thing is it evolved right out of Buddhism. That it
Yeah,
would have been a much better thing if the translators originally has translated it as anatta, as no soul.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, so that's the whole idea then about eternalism. The next one is that when upon the breakup of the body, then the existing being will be annihilated.
yeah,
This is generally the annihilationism, or the belief that most Christians, when they abandon Christianity, they still have the idea of the soul, only the soul is annihilated at the time of death. So we can call that annihilationism. And then there is the typical brand new Buddhist who sees that, oh, there is no soul, doesn't exist, never did, wasn't one, is completely delusional. That's
yeah,
called nihilism. And the Buddha was not a nihilist.
yeah. No.
If anything, the Buddha was a temporarilyismist.
Yeah, yeah. Momentism.
Yeah, Nietzsche. In the moment, the self can arise, and then in the next moment, it's gone, up and down.
Well,
It's
suchness,
mhm,
thusness, suchness, tagata. That's more like the right view of things.
mhm. So we can say then that the belief in rebirth is delicious. That this is actually what Paul was selling in Christianity. He was not selling Jesus. He was selling everlasting life.
Well, actually, because that's the
And
thing. That's what we hear, but he really wasn't. Because if you read, this is what I was telling Willie as well. And you read, he says to the people of Corinth, if you hear about a rapture going up into heaven and this and that, I tell you, do not listen to those people, for they are foolish. If you cause schisms, saying that there's this and reincarnation,
mhm,
resurrection, this, although I will say he held
those
magic.
teachings were going wild. But he was
Yeah,
saying, but
he
you
held
can't
magic.
listen to any of those guys. You got to listen to me because I've got
Yeah,
the magic key, the Jesus. I've got
that's
the
what I was about
Jesus
to
key
say.
to that open that door. You
Yeah, I
can't
was.
believe in that door without my key.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was going to say. The only thing that was holding him back really was that he was too attached to Christ. Even though Christ said, "Do not cling to me."
Hmm.
He said it.
Exactly.
He said
Exactly.
it. That was the
And
only thing that was holding him
and
back.
so they made it into a magic Jesus.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, and Paul was the one who started making it a magic Jesus, because really what he was selling was the afterlife, the whole idea that that you get more than the grave if you'll come and take and buy my product.
Yeah. 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 I don't
But
know
the
what happened.
whole Well, now here's where all of that happened. It appears that it really got going because of the Greek influence in India.
Oh,
That
okay.
it wasn't until Alexander the Great got to India and got a full version of Brahmanism that the whole idea of the afterlife came. Now, before that, it was assigned to only those who were worthy. In other words, if the priest got enough money, they would pray hard enough and do uh, what do they call it? Uh, a mummification of you. If you had the goods to do that, build
Yeah.
yourself a pyramid and all of that, then you might have the chance of becoming a god. But your heart has to be weighted with a feather. You can't have a heavy heart. You got to have a light heart, and all of that kind of stuff out of the Egyptians. The Greeks and the Romans picked up on that, so that it would be only the emperor of Rome who could become a god. Okay,
Yeah.
only the emperor of Rome, like only the pharaoh. Okay, but Brahmanism brought back, oh no, everybody can do it. Everybody is in fact reborn, and that's when the mummies started to appear. Before then, mummies were very rare, but by 300 BC or in that area of time is when the mummies were proliferating all over Egypt, because anybody could be one. Now, any wealthy man could become a mummification because he could afford it, and so this was the explosion. So by the time of Jesus, this had already become a fairly implanted kind of viewpoint that there
Uh,
is kind of an afterlife.
because they would Jewish people would do the same thing. They would wrap them in linen, make sure that they're the perfumes, everything, the oils, all that, and find a cave. They have to buy a cave and, let them, kind of go.
Isn't that interesting? Yes, they did all of that stuff. They think of mummifying Jesus.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
treated him like a mummy. I hadn't thought of that before. You're right. Exactly. Hmm. So now that we have that idea that anybody can be reborn, that is such a delicious idea that it has been propagated worldwide, and everybody kind of picks it up without understanding this basic um, dualism that the individual himself feels fear of death,
Yeah.
and yet he now has a soul that is permanent, and he is that soul.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
soul not only is permanent, but it's identifiable, so that the old books can pick him out and give him what his just rewards are, his desserts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, as a Christian, I would even say, like, when I was a Christian, I would kind of question, well, why are you sad that someone died? Isn't that the best thing ever?
Uh huh.
You know,
That would be right. That's you've heard the expression, "There are no atheists in foxholes."
no, what does that mean?
Well, that means that when you're in a foxhole, it's really dangerous, and everybody in that foxhole is praying to God to save their lives, okay?
Oh,
And there
yeah.
are no atheists in foxholes. The answer to that is yes, you were right. There are no atheists in foxholes because the atheists were not gullible enough to join the army, and
Yeah.
they hid. Or if they had to go into the army, they were smart enough to find a way of staying out of the foxholes. It's only the Christians, onward Christian soldiers, who will go to war. Smart people, they don't.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we can turn that all around and say at the average regular funeral in the United States, especially in South Carolina, there are no Christians at funerals
Yeah. Because all of them are like, don't believe in heaven at that point.
because at that point everybody's really sad. And so they hire a preacher to come and try to convince them otherwise while
Yeah. Wow.
everybody is stricken with grief. They
That's
should be clapping. Oh, Uncle George is in heaven now. Isn't that marvelous? He's dancing a jig.
Yeah, it was like I even thought about that. Like as I learned more and more about, the Dhamma, it's like it freaks you out because, like it freaks you out. Like it's like insanity, literally, a little bit. Like it's kind of like it's almost like kind of crazy because it's not like it's almost like what in the hell is happening right now? Like that feeling, like, oh my God.
Well, the answer is take another look. Let's look at it.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
look at this feeling of what the hell, too.
Yeah, yeah, because me and Willie were talking about it because I used to say, even like when you're in church, you could see it and you would have to lie. You would have to, because if you didn't, you were a sinner.
Hmm.
It's just that simple. Like it's that delusional. That, that crazy.
Well, what about the lie itself? Isn't that a sin?
Oh yeah, I know, right? That's the whole point. That's
And so that's possibly then part of the problem with religion is they always create catch-22s. They always wind up in a conflict when they're not being honest. But it is dangerous to tell people the truth because the advantage of Christianity is by telling them if you are a good person, then you will get a reward for that. So that keeps people ordinarily in ordinary right view, which is that if you do good, you'll get good results, and if you do bad, you'll get bad results.
yeah.
And if you can't see that for yourself, you can go find a preacher or somebody who will tell you all about it. And so that is basically what ordinary right view is saying there is mother and there is father. You should respect them. There are heavens and hells and other worlds. You should respect that too. And all of that stuff is of very little value to the wise, but to the foolish, it will keep them out of hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Like it will help their
because the real
conscience.
hell is the mental states that we get into when we get caught thinking we can get away with it.
Yeah, that's it. It's to help their conscience. Like, oh, to absolve their fear, like their fear of basically, like of taking responsibility for their own actions.
Uh-huh. So in a way, going to heaven is a way of getting away with it.
Oh,
And
yeah, yeah,
that's another one would be that the people, most of the Christians, almost every Christian will tell you that the reason that they and all the other Christians are going to go to heaven is because they have been saved from their sins, or let us say that they have been forgiven.
yeah,
Okay, guess what? Forgiveness is just another get out of jail free card.
yeah,
I can
yeah.
get away with it because I get forgiveness for it.
Hmm.
And
It's
so
like,
in many ways it backfires, even though the whole idea of teaching about heaven and hell is to keep people straight. When you give them forgiveness for bad behavior, they will continue that bad behavior anyway. And
yeah,
so
yeah,
there's a fly in Jesus's ointment there, in the sense that Jesus will forgive you for your sins. I'm not sure about that.
yeah.
Does he guys?
He literally said that's the whole thing about Paul and the controversy if Paul was even, because remember he was a Pharisee.
Yes, he was a Benjamin.
He was a Brahmin.
And he was a Brahmin, exactly.
That's the whole thing about. That's why I like the he literally, like, people say, oh, being a Christian. Like I used to argue against people and the church. Oh, so you're telling me you can never be free from this? Because even Jesus said, "Do not sin." Why would he ask that if we couldn't do it? Like I don't understand. I never got that. So I remember I told my pastor, "Your God sucks." That was
Hmm.
like the funniest thing ever because you know.
Well, now, you're drawing an amazingly similar situation or analogy between Christianity and Buddhism, especially in the sense of those who teach only metta, okay? Because in fact, the teachings of metta are exactly the same teachings as Jesus. To
Yeah.
take care of the poor, you visited me when I was sick, you take care of me, the Good Samaritan, that Why do you ornate yourselves when the lilies of the field don't have decorations? You know, all of those parables and everything. And the foxes in the fields and the birds have their nest, and the Son of Man has no place to rest his head. He's sounding more and more like a Buddhist monk, you know?
Yes, he spoke
And
hard.
he's and his teaching is the teachings of Metta, but the Christians can't do Metta any better than the average Buddhist can do. Excuse me, the Christians can't do the teachings of Jesus any better than the Buddhist, your average Buddhist, can do Metta. They can't do it because their mind is not straight yet.
Yeah,
And Jesus did teach about, or at least he did practice the going out into the wilderness for 40 days.
yeah, and repentance, meaning change your mind, metanoia.
Repent means to change your mind. It doesn't mean merely to confess. That real confession is to uh, repent or to turn around.
Yeah, yeah. Don't look back.
Okay.
You
No.
will become a pillar of salt if you look back. That's funny. Oh man.
Well, that is actually true within the Buddhist context too. If you stop looking at the past, you won't be so salty.
Yeah. It's so crazy because like I that is so true because he was a Pharisee. One thing that Christ did not appreciate or gave credit to was the Pharisees and the Sadducees. One was an eternalist, the other one an annihilationist. Did you know that?
I hadn't thought about it in that respect, but I do know that the Sadducees were more of scholars or second class. That it
No,
was the
that's
Pharisees that were partly they were in the Benjamins and in the Levite groups.
yeah, like the Sadducees did not believe. They're cessationists, like the evangelical. They don't believe in anything afterlife. It's very hard for them to see that.
They
Uh,
had the shoal.
yeah, yeah. And then the Pharisees believed in a bunch of stuff like demons and ghouls and and magic and miracles and all that.
Well, it's not necessarily that they believed in that stuff, but whether they found ways of making money off of teaching it.
Oh, they found money. Yeah. Oh, a lot of money. They made a lot of money. Yeah. That's what even Jesus said. That's why he went into the marketplace.
Because they sold a bunch of crap,
Yep.
right? But that crap does have value for the unwise because the unwise need rules. That's why Bhikkhu Bodhi was so critical of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, was because he could see that, Bhikkhu Bodhi could see that everybody, the whole world is full of 4-year-olds.
Yeah. Yeah.
That very few people really grow up to be fully human. Most of us stay at an emotional level of 4-year-olds, which
Yeah.
means you can't just tell them to keep their hands out of the cookie jar. You've got to slap it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's but there are people I feel like that are ready, and I think how would we even, and this is what the whole like kind of what you're doing here is kind of like getting a momentum started, I believe, right? Like for us, like that we can all
hmm
kind of pass it along into a regular world or wherever we go.
Okay, so this whole idea then about rewarding good behavior and punishing bad behavior is basically then every parent and every adult is telling every little kid to keep your hands out of the cookie jar, and we're going to make sure because we're going to guard it, but we're also going to have even a better guard, the one up in the sky or in the corner, who's going to watch you. And every time that you're caught with your hand in the cookie jar, you're going to get slapped. Okay? Guess what the kids do? They wind up going around slapping themselves for having their hands in the cookie jar.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they don't learn, number one, to keep out of the cookie jar and stop slapping themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right? So we learn both sides of the coin. We learn both the bad behavior, go ahead and do it, and then we slap ourselves for it. And then we say, but it's not a hard slap because I got forgiven. And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
you've got all of this mush rolled up into what people wind up doing. And that when we wake up to that whole process, that's what wisdom is to wake up to see, wait a minute, that cookie jar itself is dangerous. That's why the moms were telling the kids to stay out of the cookie jar when they were 4 years old.
yeah,
The cookie jar is dangerous. If I can see for myself the cookie jar is dangerous, then I can escape that cookie jar and the slapping and the confrontation and the forgiveness and all of that stuff that comes around the wanting to be in the cookie jar.
yeah, yeah, and
And so it takes wisdom. That's why in the Buddha's dispensation, the Four Noble Truths, the deeper levels of it that lead to the idea of this temporary self, this greedy and ignorant, is taught later. And so this is actually kind of a derogatory then for Buddhism in the West to have the concept of anatta being let out of the bag too soon. Because a
yeah,
lot of people will take up Buddhism with the idea, oh, at least in Buddhism, I can get away with it.
yeah, because this is actually what I said to someone when they were reading me the Tao Te Ching, and
Uh-huh.
and but he's like, it's kind of like he's not practicing that, what they teach. And I kind of said, I think they told you too much. They told you way too much too fast. And I wish that
Well,
they,
it's not so much that it's they that told it, it's that the Western mind wants, oh, this was good information, but instead of putting it into practice, I want more, I want more, I want more. I can see that, and in fact, I went through it when I was in university, and the example that I have is a math book. You're going to take a class in mathematics. You buy the book for the course. The course hasn't started, and I'm reading through that book to the point of getting lost.
uh,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah,
Why do I get lost in that math book? Because I didn't do the examples at the end of the chapter so that I fully understood the math.
yeah,
All right. And I see that that happens in music too. The kid gets pretty good at the piano, and all of a sudden he wants to take out all of the old grand masters and play the most difficult music in the world.
yeah, yeah,
Never mind, I got chopsticks down and I've got a couple of hymns down. Now I want the revolutionary etude. Now I want one of the Beethoven sonatas. Let me get a
yeah.
concerto out and bang on that and feel really bad because I can't play it because the skill level is not up to it.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's exactly what happens with Buddhism, that it should be layered. It should be good in the beginning, good in the middle, so that it's good in the end. If we lay a bunch of middle stuff on the beginners, they're going to struggle.
Yeah, yeah,
And so it has to be taught in the right sequence, with the right
yeah,
phrasing and meaning. That, by the way, is the rest of that quote. Just not good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, but it's got to be taught with the right phrasing and the right timing.
wow. And it's funny because I'm pretty sure in the monastic community that is very well, kept and everything. But it seems like in the West, we don't have. Well, first of all, I just don't
We
like the
have
reality.
greed for knowledge.
Yeah,
Greed for
but
knowledge.
I also don't like the fact that we have teachers who aren't monks. I know that sounds a little weird maybe to some people, but I never felt comfortable with that because I'm like, I want somebody who's literally doing this 24/7, who has been doing it for a long time, not just somebody who thinks that they're enlightened and they went to a retreat. That's fine, but that's why I like having you as a teacher
I
because
would rather have that guy than have the guy who says, and his main thought is, hey, this stuff is really good. I can make some money off of this.
well, yeah, but that's
And so
exactly
they start wisdom books, and they start the Berry Center, and they start the Spirit Rocks, and all of that kind of stuff.
yeah,
And now Buddhism has turned into a commercial product that's actually being they're selling the wrong stuff.
yeah, and that's kind of what I always fought for. Like tradition is important, to an extent, but it's important to contain the essence of what it means, because everything around the essence is just like show for show, like,
Hmm.
the statues and everything and all that. But like, there's some people that are calling themselves arhants that teach, and I'm
Not
like, that,
many.
yeah, but they do it, and thousands of people follow them, and and to me, I'm like, one, an arhat would never call himself that. Like, I just don't feel like he would
Guess
say it
what?
to
Of
people.
course not. And
Yeah.
here's the reason for that. The word arahat has a particular meaning, and it is not the meaning that has come to the West.
And there are questions you're supposed
The,
to ask
the
him.
actual meaning of the word arahant is one who is worthy. You can see the word Aryan built into the word arahat.
Yeah.
Aryan. Okay, so one who is then nobly minded is worthy. He is worthy of respect and he is worthy of gifts. That's what the word arahat means. That was the original use, and that is the way that it is normally used, but it is not used as a title or an honorific for an individual.
Yeah. Like, they don't care. I wouldn't think an arhat would even give a.
Right. Exactly. A really good example of that in Thailand, because he's become kind of famous for it, is Achan Mahaboa,
Ah, yeah.
who is well known. I mean, the cat was out of the bag. Everybody knew that he was an Arahant. It was like, how to say it, common knowledge,
Yeah. Yeah.
acceptable completely, and no big deal at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then they would ask him questions about it, like one of the questions, and I'm not sure whether they were asking him about himself or someone else. But the question is, can an Arahant cry?
I've seen that video. Yeah.
And the answer is sure. When anyone really gets a load of how bad our culture is, our human culture is so bad for us and causes so much trouble, he calls it a toilet full of shit.
Yeah. I love that video. I remember I watched it like when a few years ago, and it really kind of touched me, because that's one thing that really led me to, like, wow, this guy's for real. Like, obviously he's not joking.
Hmm.
You know?
And so, yes, and that Achan Mahaboa was worthy of the kind of respect that they gave him. There was kind of like 1 million people at his funeral.
Wow.
I was in Udon Thani when his funeral happened, and it changed the entire city. The
Wow.
entire city had to revolve around his funeral.
That's amazing.
Every hotel was booked. The traffic was just unbelievably all over the city. No way to get your car anywhere within a half a mile or so of the Wat itself. Every possible place to put a car was already taken up. And
That's
then getting your body into the Wat was tough too. It was a madhouse. And so that's how the Thai people respected him. He was one who was worthy of respect.
that's
That's
amazing.
what the word Arahat means.
Yeah, and there's questions that you're supposed to ask as well an arhat, right?
Well,
There's
I
certain.
know all of those questions, but the fact is that you can't ask. Here's the thing: you can ask questions of an individual to find out is he noble or not.
Mhm. Yeah,
That if he's a state of sotapan, but it takes a long time to find out if someone is an arahat, in the sense of not the worthy one, but now we're talking about the formal highfalutin definition of the word arahat is the one who is free from all 10 fetters. So that means that you have to look at him over a long period of time to check those opportunities or those occasions when he would demonstrate whether he was nobly minded or not. An example would be, does this guy ever get angry? And my example is always Achan Po, because the story is that Brenda called me all upset because one of our friend, a monk, um, she was on the boat with to go over to do a retreat. And on the way or back, this Thai monk got into a Thai conversation with an old man on the boat. And they were talking about that Achan Po was an Arahant. And Brenda was all confused. One is that Pramarut should not be talking to this old layman about Achan Po being an Arahant or not. And to number two, how are they going to know? And
Yeah,
number three, Achan Po is not normally outwardly known all over the place like Mahaboa to be an Arahant. And so she's all confused. And so I took the opportunity to explain to her that the monks know because they've lived with these monks and that they have demonstrated. For instance, Achan Po, I don't spend a lot of time with him, but over 35 years I have been around him in the early days a lot, and he
yeah,
was never angry. Never saw that guy angry, not once. Never did he have a loud voice or to speak to someone.
yeah,
That's a sign, okay, that he never gets angry. Number two was that he never asked for anything. That's remarkable. He never asked for anything. And then, in fact, at one time I asked him for a straight razor because the monks had all straight razors and all I was ever given was a safety razor. And so I asked him, can I have a straight razor too? He didn't answer me, and I never saw a straight razor.
Oh my goodness. Because they
All right.
no gifts and they don't give gifts as well.
Well, he
Like in
didn't
that
have a straight razor to give me.
also he just rather just not say anything. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's just nothing to say because he's not going to go ask for anybody that says that fat old monk over there wants a straight razor. No,
Yeah, yeah,
that's the whole idea then, and that's part of the training is to not be greedy and go around asking for gifts.
yeah.
So that takes care of fairly well, right quickly. Um, It's better number 4 and 5. If a monk never gets angry and never asks for anything, you can say this guy's on the way.
Yeah.
And also, you will find that he will never at least share with you any doubts that he has about the Dhamma, which means that he's fairly well finished the first three also. That leaves the higher fetters.
Yeah.
So, fear of death, that's one of them. If the monk is no longer afraid to die and is ready to die, and that generally you don't even see that until there's an occasion, like for instance at the point of death. How is the guy going to go out? Is he going to go out cheerfully, or is he going to go out like ordinary people, wanting the family around and everybody's praying for him and he wants to love everybody and all of that? No, the Arahant says, "Bye, folks, I'm out of here."
That's like Bhikkhu Buddhadasa with the
Yeah, exactly. Right. Okay. So that would be one way. The other one is the issue, and this is the main one, is of conceit,
uh,
to where the monks don't compare themselves or contrast themselves with anyone, that everybody's in this dukkha boat together,
yeah.
that I can't even complain about Christianity anymore because I recognize they're fulfilling a major function. If people did not believe what the Christians were telling them, we would have Bedlam, and we almost got it anyway.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's very
And so I've got actually a Muslim student, and we were talking about exactly this same thing, that you cannot criticize Islam because Islam is keeping Tunisia and Algeria and other North African countries together.
Yeah.
If everybody quit Islam, what would they start to do? They start killing each other immediately.
Yeah. Yeah. It would go into, like you said, chaos.
So we have to give them credit. We have to give them the congratulations that they deserve. Just because I don't agree with them doesn't mean that they are not worthy of my respect.
Yeah. They're you. Yeah.
So this is another way of looking at it is, and the Pali word for this is mana or conceit. Now, mana or conceit can lead to either one of two places. One is pride, and the other one is jealousy or envy,
Yeah.
right? If I compare myself to you, then I'm either going to like you because you've got something I want and I'm jealous, or I like you because I'm better than you are and I know it and you do too. And so I'm prideful.
Yeah.
Okay, now here's something very curious about that. Um, Western Buddhism and Western mentality, because of Christianity, has the understanding that the antidote for pride is humility. Guess what? A winner, a lion, is not humble, but he can also be not prideful.
Yeah.
What we do is instead of being humble, which is actually a false kind of jealousy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like pride in the opposite way.
Yeah, right. So pride and jealousy are opposites of each other, and the idea is to get out of that duality altogether, to stop comparing ourselves to one another, and just accept that we're good enough. Everybody's a friend, everybody's in the same boat, old age, sickness, and death. Now that we've all been born, guess what? We're all going to die.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we can either die happily or we can die miserably. So, this is one of the ways of telling an Arahant, one who is truly worthy, is one who doesn't compare himself to others. That everybody's acceptable, everybody's okay.
Yeah.
And then there is the other one, and that is restlessness. You have to be around an Arahant for a long time to make sure that he does not get restless about something and want to leave and go somewhere else. That generally the Arahant will stay until either the topic is concluded or the student gets tired and goes away. That the Arahant will just not break up, oh, I got to go do this or I got to go do that or whatever like that. No, he just stays with it because he's not restless. He's not anxious. He's not full of anxiety to get something done. He's just easygoing right now.
That's
So now I have covered them, except for one, and that is ignorance. But the first one about the fearlessness of death and accepting that, that is what is in the Pali is called Rupa Raga and Arupa Raga. Basically, what we mean by Rupa Raga is the self preservation instinct in its operation. And then Arupa Raga is the self preservation instinct when it has to fail, that we
like
do lose, that we
okay.
want to be a winner, but we do lose. We do want
Okay.
to stay alive, but we will die. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
there's this internal tension between am I attached to the physical world or am I attached to going away,
Not becoming and non-becoming, right? Like
becoming and non becoming, exactly, which means that, how to say it? All right, let's do it this way. There is a movie, The Coneheads, and in that movie, they play a song and the song goes back to the 1930s with Jimmy Durante. And the song is about did you ever get the feeling that you wanted to go, and then you wanted to stay? You ever get the feeling that you wanted to stay, and then you want to go? Go, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. I go, I stay.
yeah, that's
Have
an
you
I
ever
never
heard
heard.
that song?
No,
Okay.
I get it. I get it.
Now that is the duality. In fact, this is the source of restlessness. Do I go or do I stay? Do I live or do I die?
Mm.
Do I stay attached to this place, or do I hate this place enough to leave it and go someplace else? Even if the place that I go is nothing at all, because I've already thought of this place as nothing.
Yeah.
And so this is the basic turmoil between Rupa Raga and Arupa Raga. And how we come to the settlement of that is that I'm good to go and I'm good to stay. I'm good.
Yeah, yeah. It's like it doesn't really matter because there is no say in it. So why are you even?
There's nothing to stay and there's nothing to go anyway.
Yeah,
And where I
exactly.
am is nothing much, and where I go is nothing at all.
And that's that ultimate ownership, like the owner's attitude. I own. I can choose when to die. Like I can choose. Like it's impossible.
Hmm. Those
And
who are open to it will know before it happens.
yeah, I've heard that before. But that's quite like you know how
I
as we
would
practice.
I would say basically everybody knows in advance when they're going to die. Just a lot of us go into denial about it.
Yeah, yeah. Like you could, like I've heard even people who aren't Arahants can even tell before they die.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of stories that they talk about that. It's kind of funny because thinking about an Arahant, like, wow, you're like, holy shit. You know?
Well, let's go for the intermediate ones because the others are bound together
Mhm.
in the sense of you can see that anger comes from a deeper source that has fear, anxiety, and competition built into it. So
Yeah,
when you're actually eradicating that fourth fetter of anger, you are also getting are whacking away at these deeper fetters anyway.
yeah, because it's like that's the whole thing. That's like the pressure if you should it's the same thing when like when you're thinking about doing something or not doing something or should I or shouldn't I or shouldn't I or should I or should I or should it's the same thing except on a grosser or coarser level, you know.
Well, it's at the moment level.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
indecision. Okay, that indecision is in the Pali. It is Rupa Raga, Arupa Raga. Which one will I lust for?
Yeah, yeah, lust itself.
Will I lust for this physical thing that's here, or I will lust to get rid of this physical thing?
Yeah, that's it's funny because it's like the ultimate test of are you how you're it's because everybody always has a reason to be good.
Hmm. What's your reason?
Exactly, there shouldn't
I'll
be
tell
one.
you what my reason is because it's fun. I
Yeah,
enjoy it.
but I mean, like in the sense of like that's where it really hits like how greedy we can be when oh, so you're telling me that to love someone or to be kind to yourself, you need something else to tell you that.
Hmm.
And that's kind of terrifying to think about because not terrifying, but to some of us it can be like really terrifying because the reality is there is there the it's like there is a reason, but it's so much like it's in itself it is amazing to be good and to love people. But that's almost impossible for people to see because it's like,
The Buddha writes about it. The happiness, one of the highest happinesses, is the happiness of blamelessness.
yes,
When
exactly.
you've got nothing left to blame yourself for, and you know that neither does anybody else, is that when I'm blameless, that's also the same thing as worthy.
Yeah.
And so when your behavior is completely blameless, then you're worthy. And
Yeah.
that's the highest happiness of all, is the happiness of complete blamelessness. Everybody will go around shouting, "It's not my fault," but that doesn't make them happy because they know otherwise. They know that they're responsible.
Yeah, and that's where I think like when we first encounter any religion or especially Buddhism, like us fanatics, like zealots for it. Like when we become like at the beginning we become kind of like zealous, oh, this is real, this is, I want to become an Arahant, I will do this, I will. And it's funny because it's the wrong whole, it's like the
It's
whole
going in all right. It's exactly right. Exactly.
yeah,
It's
because every
basic. It's basically like flying in an airplane and finding out that the whole thing is falling apart. And everybody's got the idea, oh, well, we've got to keep this thing flying, so let's get out there on that wing and start fixing it. Oh, no. The right thing to do is to land that plane,
yeah,
to
yeah,
land it. It's dangerous to be in the air. Let's go ahead and land this thing. And then we can do the repairs easily. That's
yeah,
another concept of seclusion. Let's get away from it all. Let's get out of the air. We cannot
yeah.
fix this broken airplane while it's trying to fly. We gotta land. You gotta get away from it all.
That's like that feeling, oh, that you're all, it's almost like that same feeling that you're all one, like, but not in that magical sense, but in a real sense, equanimity, in that sense of everything is good, nothing is bad, everything is just here, it's all good, it's okay, you know.
And even if it's bad, it's still not mine.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like,
That's why the Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, and in fact, this is a quote from the Buddha, even though it's very famous from Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. His famous quote is, "Nothing is worth clinging to as I, me, or mine."
yeah,
Right?
yeah, because it's just
So
gonna
that
destroy.
means that even though the world is problematic, it's not my problem.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because like even in the suttas or in the chants, you are the only one who are the heir of your actions.
Hmm.
It's like it's your, it's actually you choose what to become, or in that sense, like in that sense. But it's funny because that's just like always been my whole reason. When I first encountered religion, I was like, oh my God, like you look up at these people like, oh wow, something about them is special because they're so happy, or there's nothing about them that is bad, right? That's what we see. Like we only see a duality between me and them or whatever. And even when I was like 17, I would read about an anagami who had, like, it's just a crazy story about all of these things, and that he was dying and everybody came around him and all this stuff, and it was really beautiful, and I was like, wow, I want to be just like that. But funny enough, the only reason I wanted to be just like that is to get the attention and to
Can
do all that stuff. And now it's like, oh my God, it's like the whole path is just renunciating that craving for becoming, non-becoming, here and there.
wanting the attention of others, because if I'm getting their attention, that means they love me. And if I
Yeah,
want their attention to love me, that means that I don't have enough love.
yeah. It's like a
And
really,
so that means in order to get their love, I've got to go out and do things to impress them so that I can get their love.
yeah, and that's why that revelation of metta is like so powerful, because you're like, you realize you don't have to do anything, you
No,
know?
we're already brothers in this boat. Why should I stand up and yell at people to row? Why
Yeah.
should I be dancing around this boat? I'm just making it unstable. Why don't I sit down and shut my mouth?
That's why metta can take you all the way up to arhantship, right? Like that's what some monks have said, that if you really understand it,
No,
no?
that was one of the big points. Was is that no, it is not the metta it and of itself. It's that You have to do, in order to do metta correctly, you have to develop the sambojana, or the
Yeah, yeah,
skills of the Eightfold Noble Path, so that you have unremitting mindfulness. In other words, you can have all the metta that you can have. You can have a big bundle of it. But if you forget to give it out, what good is it going to do you?
yeah,
So you
exactly.
got to have the sati right from the very beginning. The number two is that you got to be wise about how you're giving the metta out. You can give the wrong information, or you can give too much information, rather than giving just the right amount to get the student, for instance, into a state of aha. So
Yeah,
the next one is unremitting um, energy, which is one's right effort, which means you're willing to put in right effort any time.
yeah,
The next one is unremitting piti sukha, unremitting joy. Why? Because normally when somebody's really angry and you go back to them with joy and they come back with anger and you go back with joy, eventually the anger is going to lose and you'll salt away as a loser because your joy didn't win, because you didn't have enough of it. Right? So that unremitting, you kind of have it again and have it again and remember it again. I can handle this, I can do this. And so those are the qualities that are necessary in order to practice the Brahma Viharas, Mudita, Karina, Upekkha,
yeah,
and Metta. So um, then the relaxation, tranquility, and then the now Upekkha, or our stability, even at sea. Upekkha is the sea legs,
yeah, yeah,
right? And so basically what that's saying is that we expect that everything is going to be good for us if our floor, or if the ground is stable. And we don't like to be in an earthquake. We
yeah,
lose our composure when we're having an earthquake and everything is moving around. Well, guess what? We're in an earthquake all the time, and we do not have any stability. We have to find the stability up here in skill, rather than wanting to make the ground solid and still, because things are not still. The earth
yeah,
is constantly moving. Okay, so this is the idea then of upekkha, and with that upekkha, only then will come finally the complete unification of mind. And so those are the seven factors of enlightenment, and if you've got those, then the metta is possible. Not only possible, but it's the only thing that you've got left.
yeah. It was that's the
And
whole
that's
thing.
the problem with Christianity, because Jesus does teach the Brahma Viharas, but he doesn't teach the path to get the mind straightened out, because he wasn't around in his ministry long enough. But
Yeah,
he did teach them meditation. He tried. Why can't you guys sit up with me? And what did he practice? He practiced, um, he called it the witness, right? Well, what does that mean? It means he's watching, he's aware. He's not, and a lot of Christians think that he stayed up that night to be on guard for the Caiaphas's military.
yeah,
He was not on guard for Caiaphas's military. He was on guard for his own heart.
yeah,
Hmm?
yeah,
That was what the witness is all about. And so Jesus knew what to teach, and he knew how to teach it, and he started with metta, but he wasn't around long enough to really get the real teachings of the Dhamma into the people, and so they wound up praising him rather than praising his style or his teaching.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the whole thing. It's that's crazy. This is like it's just so much like wow, you know.
So now you know why Christians don't practice the very metta that Jesus teaches. It's because they don't have the skills.
Yeah, and it's
And
almost
that's
like hearing also about the Arahant is almost like kind of like puts things into perspective of like what the goal of this is. ultimately, like in the sense
The
of like,
goal is that there is no
yeah,
goal.
yeah,
The goal
exactly.
is to stop having goals, to sit down and enjoy your life and give up on these attainments. There's nothing to attain already.
That's the whole thing. It's like it puts your mind like at a place where it's like, one thing I like to tell myself is, or like I've experienced, is meditating on being a monk will show you where your attachments are,
Mm-hmm.
because you're afraid of what you think you're going to experience or whatever or something. But it's funny because when you think like about an arhat, you stop thinking. Like really, if you contemplate their mind,
Well, you will stop thinking unwholesome
yeah,
thoughts.
exactly. Like you stop going after any like that whole thing. Going, you stop going after
Going. Uh-huh.
finding, yeah, like going in that way.
Chasing.
Yeah, yeah. Rat race, all
You
that.
give up chasing and being chased
Yeah, and that's
so we can just sit down and enjoy because we're not being chased and we're not chasing.
yeah, and that's wow.
That's why everybody keeps getting it backwards because they think, as in Buddhism, there's something to attain. To attain Sotapan, to attain Arahat, to attain meditation. No, there's nothing to attain.
Yeah, like ever since I started learning with you, everything has been natural. Nothing has
Mm-hmm.
been forced. Where in beforehand, it was just the opposite way, you know. And
It's
now,
the Christian way. You were practicing Buddhism the Christian way, good old Christian way.
yeah, yeah, be, holy, 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 holy moly.
Holy, oh, exactly. And what is holy is something special.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the whole thing.
Where, in fact, what we really mean by that is that when something is holy, that means it's whole,
Yeah,
it's complete, it's
yeah.
finished. There's nothing left.
Like it really
There,
goes back all the way to the whole Bhikkhu Buddhadasa when you said, "Oh, try again." No, look at what you're
what are
doing.
you doing? Exactly.
And it's funny because when I kind of contemplate that from time to time, and like I remembered the other day. Have you ever seen Finding Nemo?
Who?
Finding Nemo, the movie.
Yes, I have. Okay, yes, I have.
With the
Yes,
clownfish.
with the fish, right?
Yeah. And Dory is an example of wrong, the way we do it wrongly. Like, just keep swimming. And then she forgets everything.
Uh huh.
She just does it again
Is
over
it?
and over.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
I was like, oh my God, I've been Dory my whole, so for so long, that Dory attitude or the Dory mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, just keep swimming, Uh,
Keep swimming. Keep looking. Keep
yeah,
trying.
yeah, yeah,
Try again. Keep going. Keep swimming. Right. Well, that's so much built into our culture.
And it's funny because then the clownfish, he's angry and eventually he has to learn how to accept, and then she finally kind of figures it out. Like, oh, I'm Dory. Dory,
Hmm.
okay. Like, okay. At the end, she's just fine. She's fine,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is kind of funny. Like, that's very similar in a sense.
Yes, it is. And the conclusion is almost every movie is the war is over now and we can relax.
Yeah,
And then
happy
that's the end of
do
the movie.
exist. Happy endings
You,
do really exist, right?
hmm That's what the Star Wars movies is all about. Is not about all the warfare for the first 90 minutes. It's the last 1 minute where the Wookiees are having a party.
Yeah, yeah. That's kind of beautiful because you really never
Yeah,
believe.
why not? Let's just have a party. Why do we have to have a war first?
Yeah, that's that's really profound in the sense like, oh wow, like it's
Mhm.
not just a belief, it's not just fantasy, it's not just a movie. This is a real. It's talking about something real in us, like in
Mhm.
our minds. It's practice. Yeah. Well, that's kind of like, it kind of puts you in a state of like you don't know what to do anymore and you don't care. And in
And
a
you don't care. You don't, right. You don't have to. There's nothing, no reason that we can leave the world behind without fixing it first. And we can invite other people to leave the world without them having to fix it first.
yeah, and that's what I put in the article. Craving cannot be reasoned with. It doesn't want to be reasoned with. You know, it doesn't care. It doesn't want. It just wants more, and
Just
there is
wants
no.
exactly.
Yeah, like, yeah. I don't know. So it's just like you have this feeling that it's like you're kind of thankful, like a thankful feeling of like, wow, like I'm so
Right.
thankful. Yeah,
Yeah, this is so good. So nice.
it's kind of like almost puts tears to my eyes because it's like this is real. This is real. It's not
Yes,
fake. Yeah.
it's okay to have tears of joy, a release, a relax. Everything is so beautiful. We just let it be. It's okay to cry.
It's really, yeah, because like also the experiences that I've been having with my family and everything. You never thought that that was possible.
Right. But now you know that the path exists. It's there. Method of the Buddha works. It's working right now for sure.
Maybe, maybe that's what I always thought. Maybe that's what Asian Cha meant. You don't know. You haven't meditated till you cried. Maybe in that
I
sense.
haven't heard that yet, but that's good. So I caught you meditating. Great. Yes, because this is a cry of letting go. That's what the crying is really about. It's a release. Enjoy. What a relief it is.
Yeah, it is a relief because I've always been afraid to cry. Like, kind of, I allowed myself or thought I could. So, kind of like I've been crying more than ever before. So it's kind of like, you know, but out of like the absolute realness of it, or like, in that sense, like, again, that you can, that it's real. So,
Well, I'm going to let you have this moment. We'll talk to you later. This has been a really excellent talk. This has been one of my favorites of all.
thank you.
We'll see you later, Dennis.